2.5 years ago, my partner and I bought our first house in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada. It was a modest but cozy two-story house with a spacious backyard, and the neighbors around seemed very friendly. Life at that time was truly wonderful. We had just moved in for 2 weeks when the neighbor on the right came over to greet us. He was about 70 years old, with white hair, thick glasses, a gentle voice, and extremely polite. He introduced himself as Mr. Edward. Living alone after his wife passed away a few years ago, he brought a loaf of freshly baked bread and said, "I saw that you kids just moved in, so I made some bread to invite you." We invited him in for a drink and chatted for a while. He said he was a retired engineer who used to work for a company specializing in security systems. He said our house was very beautiful and he was ready to help anytime. We felt lucky to have such a kind neighbor. Everything was normal for the first month or so, but then small details started to appear, which we didn't notice at first. One evening, I was changing clothes in the second-floor bedroom. The window had curtains drawn, but there was still a gap. Only about 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Mr. Edward stood outside, smiling kindly, and said, "Are you okay? You look a bit tired." I had never told anyone that I was changing clothes. I just smiled awkwardly and said I was fine. A few days later, my partner went down to the basement to do laundry. He had just turned on the washing machine for 10 minutes when the doorbell rang again. Mr. Edward stood there, holding a screwdriver, and said, "I heard the washing machine making a strange noise. Maybe you need help fixing it." He had never opened the basement door wide, nor told anyone. This time we started to feel a bit strange. From then on, similar things happened more and more frequently. When I was sitting working in the living room, he would come over and ask, "Are you working in the living room today?" When I was taking a shower on the second floor, the doorbell would ring right after I turned off the shower. Mr. Edward stood outside with a box of cookies and said, "I thought you might need this." Every time, he knew exactly where I or my partner was in the house. We started to pay attention and test it. One evening, I deliberately sat reading a book in the spare bedroom on the second floor, a room we hardly ever used. Only 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Mr. Edward smiled and said, "You're reading in the small room at the back, right? I brought some tea for you." At this point, we were truly scared. How did he know? We decided to install Ring cameras at the front door and some corners of the yard. At first, we didn't see anything unusual, but then one night, when I woke up to go to the bathroom at 2 in the morning, I accidentally looked at the camera app on my phone. I saw a small object flying close to the window of our second-floor bedroom. It was a drone. It flew very close, hovering right in front of the main bedroom window for about 3 minutes before flying away. The next morning, we checked all the cameras again. We discovered an even more horrifying detail. On Mr. Edward's roof, there was a small ventilation gap pointing straight toward our house. Through the wide-angle camera, we saw that he had installed a very small hidden camera in that gap, with the lens aimed directly at the second-floor windows of our house. My partner decided to confront him. One afternoon, he went over to Mr. Edward's house and asked directly. Mr. Edward initially still smiled kindly, but when my partner mentioned the drone and camera, his face changed completely. He admitted that he used to work in the security field, so he was very concerned about the safety of the neighbors. He said he just wanted to protect us, but his voice was trembling and he avoided looking straight into our eyes. We didn't dare stay there any longer. Within just 1 week, we listed the house for sale and moved out as quickly as possible. Before moving, we reported it to the police. They came to inspect and confirmed that Mr. Edward had installed a fairly professional surveillance system, drone, hidden camera through the ventilation gap, and even some audio recording devices directed toward our house. When we moved out, Mr. Edward stood in front of his door, watching us pack with a strange look in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just gently waved goodbye as if nothing had happened. Even though we have moved to a new apartment more than 20 kilometers away, I still can't sleep peacefully when I think back. Every time I draw the window curtains, I still have the feeling that someone is watching. We thought that buying our first house was the beginning of a happy life, but it turned out that right from the first days, we had been watched by the very neighbor we once thought was the kindest. I still often wonder, if we hadn't installed the Ring camera, how long would he have kept watching us? And the gifts he brought over each time, were they just excuses to get closer? Until now, every time I buy or move house, the first thing I think about is not the interior or the price, but is the neighbor watching me? A few years ago, when I was 15 years old, my family moved to a new house in the suburbs of Alberta, Canada. It was my first house move after many years living in a cramped apartment. The house was a split-level style, and my room was right in the middle, neither on the ground floor nor in the basement. One side shared a wall with the garage, and the other side had a large window overlooking the backyard. The window had vertical plastic blinds, but a few slats were missing, so even when fully closed, I could still see outside through the gaps. Opposite my room was a wardrobe with large sliding mirror doors. That meant no matter which way I faced while lying in bed, I could always see the reflection of that window. Everything was wonderful at first. I loved my new room, loved being able to choose the wallpaper and arrange my things the way I wanted. But about a year after moving in, strange things started to happen. I often stayed up late watching YouTube on my tablet because I had trouble sleeping. One night, it was very hot, so I left the window open to let in the breeze. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a rustling sound outside the window, like light footsteps on the grass or someone moving very slowly. I paused the video and listened. The sound stopped. I thought it was just my imagination, so I continued watching. But just a few minutes later, the sound came back, clearer this time. This time I also heard breathing deep, heavy breathing of an adult. My heart beat faster. I glanced toward the window, but saw nothing but darkness. I told myself it was just the wind or that I had watched too many horror movies, and tried to go back to sleep. In the following nights, the same phenomenon repeated, not frequently, but enough to make me uneasy. Some nights I heard footsteps, some nights only breathing right next to the window. Each time I would wake my dad and tell him what I heard and saw. My dad would go out to the backyard and check thoroughly, shining a flashlight into every corner. But he found no traces. He told me to stop watching horror movies and that the area was very safe. I believed him and tried to forget about it. When winter came, with heavy snow, all the strange sounds disappeared. I gradually forgot about it completely. But the following year, when spring began, the sounds returned. By then I was 16 years old. The rustling, footsteps, and breathing, everything still happened at night, usually after 11 o'clock. I tried not to pay attention, turned up the volume on my headphones, avoided looking at the window, and especially avoided looking at the wardrobe mirror. One night, I couldn't hold back. Instead of looking straight at the window, I looked into the wardrobe mirror, through the gap in the blinds. In the faint light from my tablet, I saw the silhouette of a person standing silently right outside the window. I panicked and ran upstairs to wake my parents. Dad checked again, but still saw nothing. He said I probably mistook it due to the light reflection. I tried to believe him again. This continued for many months. I started going to bed earlier, using headphones at full volume, and switched to lying facing the wall to avoid looking at the mirror. Then one night, in early December 2021, there was a big windstorm. I was watching a live stream with my boyfriend on Discord when I got thirsty and decided to get a glass of water around 11:30 at night. As I passed the living room, I saw my parents sitting there with tense and worried faces. I asked if something was wrong, but they brushed it off and said it was nothing. When I returned to my room, less than 2 minutes later, my parents called me upstairs. This time they didn't hide it from me. Dad explained that about 15 minutes earlier, he had gone to the backyard to check if anything had been blown over by the wind. In the darkness, he saw light coming from my bedroom window. When his eyes adjusted to the dark, he realized there was a man standing motionless right outside my bedroom window, looking inside. Dad shouted, and ran toward him. The man immediately turned around, jumped over the back fence effortlessly as if he had done it hundreds of times, and disappeared into the neighbor's yard behind us. At that moment, everything I had heard and suspected for the past 2 years became real. It wasn't my imagination. Someone had really been standing outside my bedroom window for many years. My parents panicked and called the police immediately. The police came, but because Dad didn't see the man's face clearly, they only took a report and advised us to install more cameras. We installed them right after. What haunted me the most was the reaction of the neighbor behind us. When Dad knocked on her door to warn her about the stranger, she didn't open the door but yelled through it, telling my parents to leave immediately or she would call the police. Her attitude was extremely suspicious. From that day on, I moved to another room and didn't dare stay in the old one anymore. The new room's window faced the street, but every time I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking, how many times had that man stood outside my window? What had he watched me do? Changing clothes, sleeping, using my phone, crying, laughing, everything. Even now, although I am older and living on my own, every time I hear the wind outside the window or see the curtains move slightly, I still shudder. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was a neighbor or just a stranger who liked to watch a teenage girl. And I especially don't know why he could stand there silently for so many years without anyone knowing. That is the biggest fear when moving into a new house. You think you are starting a new life, but it turns out someone has been secretly watching you for a very long time before you even knew. About 4 years ago, my family bought an old house in the suburbs at a very cheap price because the previous owner needed to sell urgently. The house was not the most beautiful, nor was it in the best area, but at that price, we thought we could renovate it and turn it into a warm home. My dad spent time renovating the basement because it was almost unusable. We replaced the carpet, fixed the bathroom, put up new wallpaper, and I got to choose the pattern for my own room. The first 2 months living there were truly wonderful. I liked the feeling of having more space, having a backyard to play in, and the whole family was happy because we finally had our own house. But then strange signs started to appear. On a cold winter day, I started to smell a foul, unpleasant odor from the basement whenever the weather was damp. The smell was like rotting garbage or spoiled meat. My parents also noticed it. We thought it must be a dead rat or an old plumbing issue. So we called a pest control company. They sprayed, checked thoroughly, and said they found nothing unusual. We felt temporarily reassured. Everything continued normally until one night. My family's dog suddenly barked furiously at midnight. The barking was extremely fierce, completely different from usual. My dad took a flashlight down to the basement to check, and my mom and I followed behind because we were worried. When we shone the light into the corner of the crawl space under the floor, the whole family was stunned. We saw an old sleeping bag, some boxes of dried food, water bottles, and a plastic bucket containing human waste that had been there for a long time. The foul smell was coming from that bucket. Next to it were some old men's clothes and a small flashlight. My dad panicked and called the police immediately. When the police arrived and inspected more thoroughly, they discovered a secret passage from the crawl space leading straight out to the drainage system behind the house. The passage was cleverly hidden with a wooden board and some insulation material. The police investigated and told us the horrifying truth. The person who had been hiding there for many years was the previous owner's son, a 27-year-old young man with mental disorders. His biological parents had not reported him missing, but had hurriedly sold the house to solve the problem. He had been secretly living in the crawl space of his own house long before we bought it. What was even more terrifying was that after we moved in, he still tried to come back. There were a few nights when the dog barked fiercely again, and we found fresh muddy footprints in the area near the sewer entrance. The police had to increase patrols in the area for many months. We didn't dare stay in that house for long. Just a few weeks after the discovery, my family decided to sell the house and move away. Even though we have moved to a new place, I still cannot forget the feeling when I saw the sleeping bag and the bucket of waste in our own basement. I often wonder, during the 2 months we lived there happily? How many times had he been right under our feet? How many times had he heard us talking, laughing, and walking around? And if the dog hadn't barked that night, would we have ever known that we were living with a stranger in our own house? That is the most expensive lesson when buying an old, cheap house. Sometimes the cheapest thing comes with the most horrifying secret.